3 spine-chilling true accounts of being watched, sinister forces revealed in unexplained horror. Living in the quiet suburb of Maplewood, Iowa, 33-year-old Laura believed she had finally carved out a safe sanctuary for her 2 young children after a bitter divorce. But as she hurried home one rainy afternoon, she saw something that sent a chill up her spine. A sinister, unmarked white van parked directly across from her house. It was innocuous enough at first, just another delivery vehicle, or so she thought. But it reappeared the next day and the day after that, its presence becoming an unwelcome specter in her life, looming like a thundercloud, darkening the warmth of her home. That night, after tucking Emma and Jake into bed, the cozy atmosphere shattered. Laura sat on the couch, glass of wine in hand, trying to relax, but a series of soft thumps echoed from outside. Her heart raced in a rapid drumbeat, pounding hard against her chest. Gathering the nerve to investigate, she crept to the window. Was she imagining things, or had she caught a quick glimpse of a shadowy figure lurking by the tree at the edge of her yard? Just as quickly, it vanished as she flicked on the porch light, flooding the yard with brightness. Empty street, nothing but the whispers of wind, but the fear settled deep, an unwelcome guest in her thoughts. Just a kid playing a prank, her neighbor dismissively chuckled when she voiced her worries the next day. Harmless old Mr. Caldwell, they said. Just a handyman, they assured her. But Laura knew of the hushed rumors, the unsettling disappearances that shadowed their town for years. The easy, friendly faces in Maplewood began to blur, morphing into a wild tapestry of potential threats. With growing fear, Laura kept track of everything strange that happened. Jake seemed more withdrawn lately, his laughter once joy-filled now forced, almost eerie. There was something unsettling in Emma's eyes too, as if a curtain had pulled down over her innocent spirit. Then came the day Laura discovered a sinister doll in Jake's room with glassy eyes that seemed to follow her every movement, chilling her to the bone. This was no ordinary plaything, it felt like a dark omen, breathing doubt into her heart. As she tracked the rumors, questions about the town's dark history nipped at Laura's heels. Each night grew suffocating, something, or someone, was out there. She sensed it stronger now, like a predator, eyes keenly fixed on its prey. The anxiety grew thick, palpable, suffocating, layering upon itself like an insatiable mist. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. That night, panic surged when she awoke to the sound of Emma and Jake giggling in the kitchen, far too late for innocent play. Heart racing, thoughts spiraled. She tiptoed down the dim hallway, dread tightening around her throat. With each creak of the floor beneath her feet, error seeped in. What could they be up to? And what if she was too late? Peering through the doorway, she felt icy fingers crawl up her spine. There they were, her sweet children, sitting at the table surrounded by shadows. An overwhelming sense of dread washed over her. "Mommy, come join us," Jake called out cheerfully, the words ringing false and chilling. The hollow invitation echoed ominously in her mind, and as she pushed the kitchen door, the cold realization hit her she may have already lost everything she fought to protect. Laura's heart thundered in her chest, a drumbeat of fear that drowned out everything else. The shadows danced around her children, twisting in unnatural ways, and she felt the walls of the kitchen closing in. The glowing light above the table flickered as if it too sensed the darkness lurking. "Mommy, why are you standing there?" Emma's voice was sweet, but it dripped with an undertone that felt foreign, twisted. The voice of her little girl struck a nerve, pulling her back into a reality she wished she could escape. "Let's all have a snack," Jake urged, his expression too wide, too excited. It was as if they had been possessed by a kind of glee that chilled her. Clenching her fists, Laura stepped forward, desperate to break whatever spell had been cast. "Sweethearts, it's late. Time for bed," she said with forced calm, trying to usher her children back to safety. But Mom, we're just having fun. Jake persisted, his laughter echoing too loudly in the quiet room. Something slammed against the back door. Laura whipped her head around, tense and trembling. The sound had been sharp, violent, like the thud of a body hitting the floor. She felt bile rise in her throat as anxiety turned to panic. "Wait here," she said, feeling like her voice came from someone else. She turned and moved swiftly toward the noise, heart thudding against her ribs. Leaning against the door, she pressed her ear to the cold wood. Silence. The storm outside had turned to a whisper. She felt the air grow expectant, as if everything held its breath, waiting for the next moment. And then it came again, a dragging sound that seeped from behind the door. It sent shivers racing down her spine. "Mommy, come back." Emma's voice was small, tinged with the fear that echoed Laura's own. She opened the door just enough to peek into the darkness of the porch. A gust of wind rushed in, chilling her to the bone. No one was there, but she felt someone hovering in the shadows. "Stay right where you are, okay?" she told the kids, still trying to maintain some semblance of control. But what was happening to her children? The laughter had died down, replaced by a strange stillness. "Mommy, we want to play," they said in unison, their voices blending together, a chilling harmony that sent a jolt of terror through her bones. "Play?" But, she stopped herself, realizing how wide their eyes had become, reflecting a light that wasn't natural. It was as if they were entranced. And when she saw it, a figure in the shadows, slowly approaching. Dark and featureless, it seemed to float rather than walk, closing the space between her and her children. The whites of its eyes locked onto her, devoid of humanity. "No! Stay away from them!" Laura shouted, adrenaline rushing through her limbs. With every ounce of courage, she stepped in front of the children. One step forward and the figure stopped dead in its tracks, the shadows swirling around it like a stormy ocean. "Mommy, it's here for us," Emma spoke softly, almost serenely. The tension gripped her heart, and dread pooled in her gut. What was next? Could she save her children from this unknowable terror? She felt time slow, the weight of that moment expanding into infinity. In a final spurt of desperation, she reached for her phone, trembling as she fumbled for the light, for protection, for hope. But then came a laugh, dark and knowing, vibrating through the very air, a laugh that soaked into her bones. The kitchen door swung shut behind her, slamming with a sickening finality. In that instant, she realized with a sinking heart that whatever was here wasn't interested in the light at all. It craved the dark. "Mommy! Help!" The cry was drowned out by something more sinister than her children's pleas, as cold fingers of despair wrapped tightly around her throat. The house felt alive, and something was awakening in the shadows. Laura's world spiraled into chaos as she realized she might be facing something far worse than she had imagined, a trap with no visible exit. Will she find a way to protect her children from the encroaching darkness? Or is it already too late? The figure loomed, its shape pulsating as if it were made of darkness itself, and with every flicker of the kitchen light, it grew more pronounced, an entity formed from dread. Laura felt her resolve waver, her body heavy with an instinct to run, to flee from this horror. "Mommy, let us play!" Jake yelled, his eyes gleaming with a wildness that terrified her. The laughter echoed once more, hollow and haunting, resonating within the walls of their home. "No! We're not playing!" she screamed, urgency pouring into her words, but they seemed to bounce off the walls, swallowed by the darkness. The shadows responded, slinking closer to her, curling around her feet. "Mommy, we like it here." Emma chimed in, her voice drifting through the air like smoke, seductive and unnerving. Laura's heart dropped. It was as if her children were being pulled into a realm she couldn't grasp, lured by promises and whispers that twisted the very essence of her little ones. The phone slipped from her clammy fingers, clattering against the floor, the light extinguishing just as panic erupted within her. She was losing them, losing her children. The window rattled, the storm outside merging with the turmoil within, hands reaching for her from the suffocating darkness. "Stay away!" Laura yelled, stepping back instinctively, but the entity moved, a slow undulation that filled the space with a deep, oppressive silence. The walls felt closer now, suffocating, closing in like noose cords around her sanity. What could she do? How could she combat something that lived in shadows, something determined to claim her children? Fear gripped her throat, so tight she almost choked on it. "Mommy, we want to be with it." Jake's voice was soft now, dulcet and laced with something dark. She caught a glimpse of the gleaming eyes, intoxicated by a pull she couldn't see, as if an invisible cord tethered them to the thing that was once just a mere shadow. "Don't you dare!" With desperate energy, she lunged between her children and the figure, shielding them, though she felt utterly defenseless. "No more games." The words escaped her lips like an incantation, a last-ditch attempt to break the enchantment binding her kids to the darkness. A chilling pause fell across the room, punctuated only by their confused silence until the laughter restarted, a chorus of eerie amusement that ricocheted off the walls, mocking her bravery, and then it happened. The entity surged forward, an explosion of blackness, a rush of wind and whispers. Laura barely had a moment to react before she was swept into it, tendrils of shadow wrapping around her limbs, constricting. "Mommy, don't fight. It's fun." Emma and Jake sang sweetly in eerie unison, their innocent faces awash with something terrible. Fear morphed into horror as she realized they were slipping away, vanishing into a deepening abyss of inky terror. "No!" Laura screamed, the sound dissipating into the growing storm, and she fought with everything within her. The kitchen swirled, her heart thumping wildly in her chest, determined to protect them, to pull them back from the brink, but the darkness was relentless, sinister fingers of the unknown reaching deeper into her psyche, shoving her thoughts aside, suffocating her will. A blinding flash erupted, and for a split second, her children looked back at her, eyes wide, mouths frozen, as the connection frayed. What would happen if they vanished completely? What would she do next? Would she lose them to this dark entity once and for all? As the figure reformed amidst the shadows, its whisper curled around her, promising an eternity of forgotten dreams. And then, the lights flickered again, pulsing wildly. The kitchen, her heavy prison, trembled with an ominous energy, the air electric with fear. Outside, the thunder rolled, a warning of the storm to come. But Laura stood resolute. She would dive into that darkness if it meant bringing her children back. Caught between despair and hope, she lunged toward the unseen, ready to face whatever lurked there. What would she find in the heart of that darkness? Another desperate truth? Or a road to redemption? The moment Laura plunged into the abyss, the world twisted, sights and sounds warped in a cacophony of terror. The grasp of the shadows felt like icy chains, pulling her deeper into the void. She could no longer hear her children. Instead, an overwhelming silence filled the space, thick and suffocating, as if the air itself conspired against her. Every pulse of the dark entity echoed in her skull, a relentless drumbeat reminding her of the stakes at play. She fought to scream, but her voice was caught in the web of shadows, suffocated by an unseen force. The coldness seeped into her bones, chilling her blood. But amid the terror, she clung to one painful thought: she had to find Emma and Jake. As she moved, the darkness thinly settled around her, swirling like a thick fog. She stretched her hands out, feeling for something, anything to ground herself. Her fingers brushed against a cold surface. A wall. Panic flared anew, her heart raced faster than she thought possible. She pressed her ear against it, straining to hear past the oppressive silence. No voices. Just the soft, maddening whisper of the shadows, echoing her fears. "Mommy." Jake's voice finally broke through, distant yet unmistakable. The sound erupted like a lifeline. "Mommy, help us." The urgency in his tone made her blood run cold. It was then she heard it, the laughter. That same hollow, mocking laughter. It wrapped around her like a sick joke, twisting everything she knew about her children. "Jake!" she screamed, her voice now fueled by desperation. "I'm coming. Hold on." The shadows shifted with her words, as if they were alive, taunting her, wrapping tighter around her throat. She pushed against the wall, a raw strength igniting within her, and suddenly the darkness began to part. Through the slivers, glowing pinpricks of light emerged, swirling like stars in a void. She glimpsed shapes within shadows of her children, flickering in and out of view, their faces blurring with anguish and delight. Mommy Emma's voice much softer now, almost dreamlike, "Come play with us." "No." Laura yelled, frustration boiling over. "You're not themselves. Snap out of it. Fight it." At that moment, the shadows recoiled, almost pained by her assertion. Laura seized the opportunity, pushing through. The laughter turned to howls, a furious wind swirling around her. "Your children are better off with us." A voice slithered through the darkness, deep and drawling, dripping with malice. "They will be happy free." Vile images flashed in her mind, her children dancing gleefully, shadows embracing them, twirling them away. It was a nightmare painted with childhood innocence, turning sinister under the weight of that creeping malevolence. "Shut up!" she shouted. With a feral roar of determination, she tore through the shadows, adrenaline coursing through her veins. Each step felt like wading through molasses, but she kept going. She could sense the lights growing brighter, the figures becoming clearer. And then she saw them. Her children, trapped in an embrace with the darkness, joyful yet terrified. Tears streamed down their faces, lips curling into constant screams, glee mingled with horror. "Mommy!" they cried again, fingers reaching, but the shadows ripped at their limbs, pulling them deeper. "I'm here," she wailed. "I want to let you go." With a final burst of strength, as if the spirit of every mother before her flowed into her soul, she charged forward, fists raised. The figure at the heart of the darkness twisted with rage, an angry silhouette that pulsed violently. In that moment, something broke. There was a blinding light, a deep rumble. Her kitchen imploded around her in a fragmentation of shadows and screams, and just like that, she found herself outside, back in the storm. But the world had shifted. The kitchen stood dark and silent, an eerie stillness settling over everything. The storm passed overhead, but the threat felt palpable. "Emma? Jake?" she called out, heart hammering wildly. The door stood ajar behind her, whispering new horrors yet unseen. But there was something in the air, an unfamiliar presence. Lurking, watching, waiting. Was this relief? Or the beginning of a new terror? The wind howled through the trees, as if beckoning her back. What awaited her inside? Would she find her children or face the shadows once more? The door creaked softly as the wind pushed it further open, revealing the darkness within. Laura's heart raced, each beat pounding in her ears like a war drum. The shadows edged closer as if aware of her hesitation, clawing at the edges of her resolve. Taking a deep breath, she stepped over the threshold, the chill of the floor creeping up through her shoes and into her bones. The kitchen was soaked in silence, but the absence of sound screamed louder than chaos. Dread pooled in her stomach, an unsettling heaviness that weighed her down. Emma and Jake. She needed to find them. The thought spurred her onward, even as every nerve screamed at her to turn back. "Emma! Jake!" she called, her voice trembling. The stillness swallowed her words whole, and her hope flickered. Shadows played tricks on her eyes. She could have sworn she saw their faces, brief flashes of their frightened expressions lingering at the edges of her vision. Then she noticed it, a subtle vibration in the air, like static before a storm. It became a rhythmic pulse, resonating through the walls. She approached the dark family room adjacent to the kitchen, the shadows deep enough to swallow light whole. The pulse intensified, a dark heartbeat that felt alive. Suddenly, a giggle erupted from the darkness. The unmistakable sound of her children, followed by a sharper, more piercing laughter, a taunting malicious tone that sent ice down her spine. "Mommy, come play." Emma's voice floated through the darkness, eerily cheerful. "Stop it!" Laura shouted, rage and desperation blending in her throat. "You're not my children." The laughter morphed into a low growl, mocking her defiance. The shadows writhed at her feet, creeping closer, coiling like snakes ready to strike. She felt the chill wrap around her ankle, grasping, testing her resolve. "Let them go," she cried, panic lacing her voice. "They're not yours." The pulsating darkness pulled back, gathering itself as if considering her words. A moment of reflection? She took a step forward, fear hitting her like a cold wave. Shadows writhed at her sides, coaxing her to succumb to despair. What were they? What did they want? "Please, I just want my kids." With no warning, the room exploded into chaos. The lights flickered violently, casting momentary glimpses of her kitchen. Everything was in place, yet somehow, everything felt wrong. The laughter rose to a frightening crescendo, filling her head, throbbing like a relentless drum. "Play with us, Mommy." It was both Emma's and Jake's voices, layered over each other, sowing confusion into her heart. Visions of them danced before her, smiling, joyful, while the darkness twisted their faces into masks of something sinister, and then she felt it. A creeping sensation of being watched, a presence looming just beyond the shadows. She turned, but there was nothing. The air turned thick, pressing against her skin like a weight. "Mommy." A new voice, one she didn't recognize, pierced through the chaos. It was softer, more desperate. "Help us, who are you?" she yelled into the dark, voice trembling. The response was silence, thick and oppressive. But then, something moved within the blackness, slinking forward, coalescing into a shape that made her blood turn to ice. Two hollow eyes blinked at her. This wasn't just a shadow. It was something else, the entity whispered, its voice twisting with malice. "They'll never be free unless you join them." Laura took a step back, heart racing, desperation igniting a fire in her chest. "No. I won't give in to the darkness." But as the shadows closed in, she realized the darkness wasn't just hungry for her fear. It craved something more. "Mommy," it echoed, mimicking her children's voices. "Join us, forever." Terror paralyzed her. There was no escape. Or was there? She took a deep breath, summoning the last threads of her will. For Emma, for Jake. Could she fight through the darkness, or would she lose herself to whatever horror awaited? Her legs trembled, and she felt the floor shift beneath her. What would she sacrifice to save them? The shadowy figure lunged, diving towards her as the air grew thick with chaos. And in that moment of chaos, a thought pierced the fear she needed to find the light. But how? As the darkness enveloped her, she tumbled deeper into the unknown. What lay waiting in the depths of fear? The world around Laura shifted violently, engulfing her in thick shadows as if the darkness had suddenly come alive. She felt its tendrils wrap around her limbs, slowing her every move, and her breath became shallow with panic. Fight it, she thought, clutching at the fraying threads of her sanity. In the pulsating blackness, the echoing laughter morphed into a cacophony of tortured screams, all clamoring for her attention. "Emma! Jake!" she screamed, desperation clawing at her throat, choking her words. With a sudden push, she stumbled forward, breaking through the veil of shadows in search of her children. The air was frigid, and the walls of the house seemed to move, shifting to cheat her senses. She was in the hall now, the faint glimmer of moonlight barely carving out space among the consuming dark. It played tricks on her vision. The corners of the rooms were alive with shifting shapes, monstrous silhouettes ready to pounce. Was it just her imagination, or did they whisper her name? "Help us!" the voice returned, distorted and pleading, an unsettling fusion of her children's tones. Each word sliced into her heart like glass. "Stay with us!" "No. I want." Tears streamed down her cheeks. She wasn't ready to join whatever horror this was. Not yet. Summoning her courage, she pressed onward. She had to find them. Perhaps the source of the vibrations, the pulse that had drawn her here, would lead her closer. Emma. Jake. She howled again, using her voice like a weapon against the terror that surrounded her. The walls trembled with her cries, vibrating with the weight of her fear. And still, the darkness mocked her, whispering that hope was a cruel joke. Suddenly, from the depths of the hall, a spark flickered, an ember dancing against the abyss. Laura's heart raced. There it was, the dim promise of light. She rushed towards it, intoxicated by the prospect of salvation, each step like a leap of faith. It flickered again, wavering as if unsure of its brightness amid the overwhelming dark, but as she drew closer, the darkness stirred. It surged forward, a tidal wave of shadows crashing over her. It was now or never. The golden beam became brighter, beckoning her like a candle in a storm. She stretched her arm forward, feeling the warmth draw near. Would it be enough? The shadows swirled around her, clinging tight, whispering sweet lies. Stay, you'll never be alone, join us, never. She screamed, shoving against the dark mass, pushing through to grasp the light. With one final effort, she lunged. The instant her fingers grazed the brilliant glow, a piercing shriek erupted around her, drowning out the dreadful whispers. It was a wretched sound, rage and despair mixed into one. The shadows recoiled as if scalded, pulling back from her touch, but the light was not merely salvation. It burned with intensity, illuminating the depths of the night with blinding clarity. In that moment, everything crystallized. She could see them, her children, ghostly forms bound in chains of darkness. Their faces twisted in anguish as they reached out with translucent hands. "Mommy!" they cried, their voices fighting through the layers of malevolence. "No! I'll get you!" Laura screamed, the light quaking beneath her grasp, but the shadows fought back, enraged and frantic. They lashed out, howling in fury as Laura tightened her grip. She felt the pull of the darkness, wanting her to succumb, to join the horrific wail of despair that filled the room. As chaos reigned, she faced a choice: remain anchored in the light, fighting for her children's freedom, or let it consume her entirely. "Stay with us, Mommy. Stay forever." In that moment of clarity, she saw the true horror. The shadows did not just want her, they wanted a family, a vessel to bind in despair and darkness forever, but Laura's heart burned with a love stronger than fear. With a rush of adrenaline, a piercing cry escaped her lips: "I'll fight with every breath I have." As she leaned into the ethereal glow, she prepared to face the full ferocity of the shadows for her children. Would the light protect her, or was it merely a trap, brightening only to gut her hope with a final blow? The dark tempest curled, closing in, as a sudden silence wrapped around her, heavy and expectant. "Now you shall know what it truly means to be lost," the shadows whispered, the air electric with anticipation, and in that moment, she knew she hadn't just stumbled into a nightmare. She stepped into a war, one that stretched far beyond her comprehension, but who would win? The light that sought to save her children, or the darkness that craved them as its own? The chilling truth loomed just out of reach. The light pulsated around Laura, glowing with a warmth that felt oddly alive. For a brief second, it hung in the air, suspended in a delicate balance of hope and fear. She could feel the cold breath of the shadows creeping closer, ready to engulf her whole. It was a palpable struggle, the chaotic sounds around her merging into one deep, thrumming drone, competing against the shrieks of despair from her children. "Let them go!" Laura shouted, her voice rising above the din. But the shadows only laughed, a sound like nails on a chalkboard, echoing through the twisted hallways of her home. "Come to us, it will be easier," they cooed, their words slithering into her mind, promising a release she didn't want. Why would she ever want to give in? "Emma! Jake!" She screamed again, desperation wrenching her spirit. The light flickered with each cry, waning as the shadows pressed against the fragile barrier she stood behind. She could feel the chill seeping deep into her bones, extinguishing the warmth the light offered. A sudden jolt shot through her body as the darkness pressed forward, shoving her deeper into the confines of its despair. Every instinct screamed at her to flee. She stumbled backward, the flickering glow dimming, and she fought to hold onto it like a lifeline. But the shadows writhed, forming a wall that loomed larger than life, smothering the air around her. "Mommy!" The voices grew frantic, and Laura's heart tore at the seams. She couldn't lose them. Not to this monstrous force that sought to tear them apart. "I want to let you take them." With a surge of power born from love, she slammed her fist into the walls of darkness, feeling the resistance push back fiercely. The shadows recoiled, but they were not deterred. "You cannot save them with mere words," they hissed, gloating in their strength. Laura gritted her teeth. She was just a woman one against a sea of horror. With each second that bled by, the shadows clawed closer, whispering poison into her thoughts, spinning tales of futility. "Join us, you were never meant to fight alone. We are your only comfort." In that moment, the light flickered one last time, revealing an opening. With her pulse racing, she lunged toward it. But instead of breaking through, she felt the shadows circle around her, gnashing their teeth at her defiance. They tightened their grip, and she gasped as she felt chains begin to bind around her wrists, twisting and writhing like serpents. "No!" She blinked away the tears. She had to stay strong. Emma and Jake depended on her. "Stop it!" she roared, thrashing against them. But their grip only grew tighter, the metal biting into her flesh. The shadows began to shift again, dancing through her mind with images that made her stomach churn. Glimpses of an idyllic life, a family, memories not yet lived but whispered promises of what could have been. "A safe place we can be whole forever." Infuriated, she shook her head violently. Nothing they offered could lure her into their deadly embrace. "I want my children." "No!" they screeched, an enraged chorus echoing violently through her skull. All at once, the dark mass slashed forward, devising plans to strip away every ounce of resolve. And then, in that moment, everything froze. The air felt electric, charged with a promise of doom. Within the stillness, she heard her children's voices, soft and plaintive, beckoning from the depths of shadow. "Mommy, come play with us, just let go." The shadows instigated a whisper of delight amongst themselves, sensing her moment of weakness. Fear wrapped around her like a vice, choking out clarity. Just as despair threatened to drown her, she felt a spark ignite amidst the gloom, fueling her with rage and urgency. "No matter what you do, you will not take my family." Suddenly, the weight of the chains erupted into a tempest, and she battled back with every ounce of her remaining strength. Laura yelled, the sound piercing through the silence like shattering glass, heart pounding, adrenaline coursing. Would it be enough to break free? As the shadows twisted and howled in chaos, she surged forward, hoping to break through their desolate power. She knew the truth now: nothing was more powerful than love. But could she wield it as a weapon to ward off the darkness once and for all? What lay ahead loomed uncertain and terrifying, as the shadows hovered, waiting for the inevitable moment her resolve could falter. And there, in the weighted calm, a thought slipped through her: fear. What if they were not the only ones trapped? What if she was not the only one willing to fight? The shadows recoiled as Laura's voice echoed through the darkened space, shaking the very foundation of their sinister hold. For a split second, doubt flickered in the corners of their swirling mass. It was just enough for Laura to breathe, just a moment's pause before the chaos surged anew, relentless and fierce. With every ounce of her will, she pushed against the chains, feeling them twist tighter as if sensing her defiance. The cold metal bit deeper into her skin, but she would not relent. Beneath the pain, a fire ignited, fueled by the cries of her children. "Emma! Jake!" she cried once more, the anguish in her voice striking like thunder through the stillness. The shadows yanked on the threads of her mind again. "They're ours now, you can't keep them," they shrieked, their voices laced with glee, wrapping around her thoughts like a constrictor. "No!" she shouted, her voice trembling but defiant. The light pulsed stronger, illuminating the flickers of hope that beckoned in the dark. You will not win. They are my light. Suddenly, the room twisted and turned as if she were caught in some grotesque carnival ride. A cacophony of laughter echoed, sounding eerily like her children's giggles, turning her stomach. The shadows rose higher, contorting into monstrous shapes, losing the semblance of humanity and morphing into nightmare silhouettes. Laura clenched her jaw, overcoming the fear that threatened to paralyze her. Together, she shouted, envisioning Emma and Jake beside her, their small hands firmly clasped around her own. Fight with me. We're stronger than this. In response, the shadows shrieked, their cries clawing at her eardrums. You think you can break free? There is no escape. An idea sparked. What if she wasn't alone in her fight? What if her children could hear her? Emma. Jake. I love you. Listen to my voice. Her heart raced as she shouted, sending her thoughts into the abyss. The flicker of light shimmered brighter, and for an instant, she felt a tug, a presence trying to reach her from the other side of darkness. The shadows recoiled again, visibly shaken. No. You will not call them. We own them now. But the truth was undeniable. Love could illuminate the darkest corners. With every ounce of her heart, Laura pressed forward, refusing to let despair win. She took a step closer to where the flickering light shone the brightest, her heart a drum in her chest, shaking the ground beneath her, and then she saw them. Faint outlines, her children, reaching for her through the shadows, their tiny hands stretching as if defying the dark. Laura felt her heart take flight. Hold on. I'm coming. I'm here. Suddenly, the weight of the chains dropped, an unexpected release flooding through her limbs. Ignited by desperation, she charged forward, aided by the flickering glow that grew more powerful, responding to her love. As she barreled through the shadowy mass, she felt the bitter cold slice at her but pushed through. The warmth of her love flared like a beacon, biting back against the encroaching darkness, but then, just as she broke through the veil, the shadows unleashed a furious scream that rattled her bones. You'll regret this. You cannot escape. The barrier shattered, and she stumbled forward, collapsing into a haunting void that felt infinitely empty, then silence. The air lay still and thick, filled only with her ragged breaths. She pushed herself up, heart pounding like a war drum. Emma. Jake? She called out, the void feeling suffocating. Questions spun through her mind. Where were they? Had she finally reached them, or was she still lost in her desperate fight against the shadows? In the eerie stillness, she awaited an answer, but all she heard was a faint echo of her own voice, lost in the dark void. And just as panic began to creep in, she caught a flicker of light again, this time brighter than before, but nestled beneath layers of the dread that surrounded her. Laura moved toward it, unsure of what she might find. Could it be her children? Or something much more sinister lurking beyond? With resolve, she stepped forward into the glow, heart racing. What if the shadows were lying in wait, ready to spring back into play? As Laura approached the glow, her heart thudded loudly in her chest. With every step, the light flickered and wavered, like a candle stubbornly fighting against the wind. The shadows hung thick, whispering maliciously, their voices weaving in and out of her consciousness. Where do you think you're going? One shadow hissed, slithering closer, its breath cold and sour. Home is not your destination. Her instincts screamed to flee. But the thought of Emma and Jake anchored her. She swallowed hard, moving closer to the light, straining to hear anything beyond her own frantic breaths. Each pulse of light seemed to pulse with emotion, anger, sadness, longing. Emma. She called again, desperation tinging her voice. Jake. The flickering intensified, and suddenly, she saw them. Not just shadows, but tangible forms moving within the light, a pair of small figures, their faces blurred but hauntingly familiar. Mom! They cried, their voices soft but filled with urgency. Help us! The shadows screamed in frustration, their roiling mass growing more chaotic. You can't have them! They shrieked. They belong to us. Laura's pulse raced as she felt an overwhelming tide of fear wash over her. These weren't just her children, they were beings of innocence caught in a war far darker than she could comprehend. She extended her arms, the need to protect them driving her to push through the rising tide of shadows. But with every step, the weight returned, thick and suffocating, dragging at her limbs. Stay strong, fight. She gasped, forcing her way forward. The presence of her children was close, closer than it had ever been, their energy pulsating with a rhythm she could almost reach. When she finally reached the edge of the light, the darkness clawed at her ankles, a grotesque grip that sent chills crawling up her spine. It felt like they would drag her down any moment. Leave her alone. Emma screamed, her small voice surprisingly fierce, with takes of her children's courage fortifying her. Laura dug deep within herself, finding a primal instinct to protect her own. You will not take them! She shouted, defiant. The light exploded around her, casting brilliant rays that pushed back the shadows with ferocity. The chains fell from her body, clinking and clattering to the floor, a sound of freedom. Grab my hand. She reached for her children, who were still caught, straining against the pull of darkness. They hesitated, eyes wide with terror. No! The shadows wailed, surging forward, their forms morphing into grotesque parodies of humanity, gnashing teeth and clawing fingers. Laura's hands trembled, but she held steady. You're stronger than this. Come to me. Time hung in the air like smoke. Then, with a blinding rush of light, they tore free. Emma and Jake sprinted toward her, laughter mingling with fear as they hurtled into her embrace. Warmth enveloped them, but the shadows were relentless. We'll always be here. The shadows hissed. No matter where you go, we'll watch, and wait. And just like that, the dark began to recede, drawing back in a low, seething murmur. Breathless and trembling, they stumbled into the light together, everything feeling strangely quiet, yet the echoes of sinister threats lingered. Where are we? Jake whispered, looking up at his mother with wide eyes. Before Laura could respond, the ground trembled beneath them, cracking open with a chilling rumble. From deep below, a sinister whisper slithered through the air. You can never escape us. Laura held her children tightly, heart pounding, but for how much longer could they cling to this fleeting light? As they moved forward, the ominous presence coiled around them like a sentient fog. What lay ahead waited with bated breath. And deep inside her chest, the flames of fear ignited again. Would the shadows strike back? Would they ever truly be free? Laura's heart raced as she tightened her grip around Emma and Jake, the glow of light starting to pulse gently beneath their feet. It felt warm, alive, and as they stood together in that fragile comfort, she finally dared to hope. Could they really have escaped the depths of despair? She surveyed her surroundings, recognizing an ethereal change. Shadows receded, thin threads of darkness weaving away from the radiant light like smoke dissipating into the air. Mom, where are we? Jake asked, his voice trembling, his eyes wide with confusion and lingering fear. I don't know, honey, she replied, trembling herself. But we're together, and that's what matters. The reassurance left her lips, but doubt clawed at her throat. Stay with us. A whisper echoed in the distance, dripping with malice. Shadows flickered, mere remnants of the terror they had just escaped. It clawed pitifully at the edges of their safety, lingering and seething. Not today. Laura barked, voice rising with fierce determination. You won't take my children. You're nothing but a wretched remnant of fear. At her words, the air thickened with tension, the shadows roiling angrily, but in their dance of anger, they seemed to lose their power. Laura felt a shift within the light, an energy that vibrated with the hope and love she carried for her family. Hold on tight. She urged, stepping forward, dragging her children into the luminous warmth that radiated from within them. They moved as one, a family against the night, as they pushed further into the light, every step propelling them toward the freedom they craved. "Mommy, I'm scared," Emma whimpered, clutching her brother's hand. The innocent fear tugged at Laura's heart, igniting a primal instinct to shield them, protect them from the horrors that still stalked the edges of their world. "It's okay, sweetie. Just stay close to me," Laura said, voice steady despite the turmoil in her heart. The pulsating light seemed to respond to her will, glowing brighter, illuminating the path ahead. As they stepped forward, something extraordinary began to happen. The shadows transformed, unraveling their ghastly forms. They twisted in agony, screaming and howling, fading away into the void, as if the very air rejected them. "Look, Mommy, they're disappearing," Jake exclaimed, pointing in wide-eyed awe. "Yes, together we can make them disappear, forever," she said triumphantly. With every step forward, the dark whispers turned into cries of anguish, their hideous shapes growing thinner, powerless against the love that radiated so fiercely from Laura and her children. The ground quaked, shifting beneath their feet. Beneath the warmth, there was a crack of fissure that seemed to beckon Laura with a soft, dark promise. She knew it was deceptive. Trap laid by shadows that questioned her resolve, tempting her to linger at the edge of darkness. But Laura wouldn't allow it. "Stay with me," she shouted, heart pounding as she felt the abyss draw closer. "We fight together. We will not be afraid." The light pulsed again, digging its roots deep within her spirit, clashing against the shadows and sending them recoiling further. The children's resolute cries of "Mommy" echoed amidst the chaos, fueling her resolve. "Step into the light," she commanded, encouraging her children forward, pushing against the terrifying whispers, drowning out the darkness with fierce love and determination. Suddenly, the ground erupted, sending shockwaves through their surroundings. A monstrous, dark form began to emerge from the fissure, coiling upwards in a twisting shape that clawed desperately for them. Soft, cool voices filled the air, a mixture of chaos and temptation. "Join us," it coaxed, curling tendrils of shadow enticing them nearer, begging to feed off of their courage. "No. We stand united," Laura yelled, feeling the power ignite in her veins, surging against the terrifying presence. With a final burst of light, she reached out, drawing her children to her side. "Together, we are not afraid," they shouted in harmony, voices ringing clear and fierce. And with that affirmation, the darkness exploded, the shadows shrieked as they were torn apart piece by piece, scattering into the nothingness from whence they came. The air crackled with energy, shimmering in waves of light, a beautiful symphony of hope after the relentless storm. And then, all at once, the endless void around them dissolved, leaving them enveloped in a brilliant glow. The world opened up, revealing a landscape of pulsing light, vibrant colors surrounding them in an embrace of warmth. "Mom? Is this home?" asking Jake, the innocence in his tone grounding Laura amid the surreal beauty. "Yes, my love. This is our home now," she whispered with tears in her eyes, heart swelling with a love that could conquer even the deepest shadows. They stood together, bonded by the knowledge that they had overcome, that love was their greatest weapon. And behind them, the dark whispered, defeated, a warning echoing through the silence. "Remember, we'll always watch and wait." But for Laura, it was a truth that held no power. Their hearts now glowed brighter than any shadow that dared approach. As they began their journey into the radiant new world, embracing every moment with open arms, Laura knew this was not just the end, but the beginning of a life filled with love, laughter, and a resolute sense of safety. They had risen from the dark, victorious, now they could finally breathe deeply, free from the shadows forged in fear. And just as Laura cast a backward glance, the echoes of darkness faded entirely, leaving only an enduring safety net made by love's eternal grasp. That night, as they settled into their new home, the moon rose high and steady. "Mommy, we're safe," Emma chirped. "Yes, we are," Laura smiled and held them tight, knowing that they would always embrace one another, no matter what shadows dared cross their path in the future. Together, they whispered, their words intertwining like a promise, a commitment that lit the way as they slept soundly, unafraid in their sanctuary. The end or a new beginning? Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. Instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support and keep the adventure alive. Don't wait even one more second to share.